President Biden is making climate change and the environment one of the key agenda items of his administration. The president has promised to cut greenhouse gas emissions in half by 2030. He says that goal can be reached by passing his $2 trillion infrastructure bill, which allocates billions of dollars to help address the nation's climate crisis. For more on this, I'm joined by Nathaniel Keohane. He is the Senior Vice President at the Environmental Defense Fund and served as an advisor to former President Obama. Nathaniel, what do you make of the president's goal for greenhouse gas emissions? Do you think it goes far enough?
Yes, I do. First of all, thanks very much for having me on. President Biden announced a really bold goal. This is one that puts the U.S. back in the top tier of countries globally. It puts us right up there with Europe and the United Kingdom, almost their level of ambition. And it's something we needed to see, I think, after 4 years in which the Trump administration had pulled the U.S. out of the Paris Agreement and had really tried to pull back from the world. It was very important to see the president lay out this very ambitious goal. And now we need to put the policies in place to implement it. And that is doable, but it won't be easy.
Well, I wonder what other action is needed from federal and state governments. How crucial really is Mr. Biden's infrastructure plan in being able to meet the goal? Is it something that can be achieved without passage of this legislation?
So the infrastructure plan is really the first key and critical test. And I think it'll be very important to make sure that Congress passes a package that invests in clean energy infrastructure, that invests in a modern electric grid, that invest in electric vehicles and charging stations, but that also invest in things like mass transit, but also things like in the domestic supply chain for manufacturing electric vehicles and wind turbines like the ones you see on the screen. Part of restoring American leadership in this clean energy economy is restoring American competitiveness, and it's going to be vital that infrastructure package put climate and clean energy at the center of it so that we can really restore America's place in the world, not only in terms of global diplomacy, but also in terms of the global economy, because that kind of infrastructure investment will mean jobs, it'll mean good jobs, and it'll mean restoring the economy and the economic strength of the country going forward.
Nathaniel, I want to ask you about that. You're talking about restoring the U.S.'s position in the world, particularly when it comes to climate change. But Mr. Biden obviously had the U.S. rejoin the Paris Climate Accord on his first day in office and has been pushing other nations with high greenhouse gas emissions to commit to cutting them by 50%. How are other nations responding to President Biden's push? Is the U.S. perceived as a leader on this issue?
Well, as I said, we have a lot of making up to do, in a sense, from the last 4 years. I do think that President Biden and his administration have come out of the gate very fast and have shown real leadership. It's not just the president you see across the administration. You know, the administration talks about a whole of government approach, and that's what we've seen so far from this administration, with champions on climate change really across the board in Treasury, in the National Economic Council, of course, in the Environmental Protection Agency, but also the State Department and so on. With respect to other countries, you know, we saw some progress at the climate summit a couple of weeks ago, and I think that was in part the result of the renewed American engagement. You saw Canada come forward with a stronger target. You saw Japan come forward. We still need more from countries around the world, including China, which has a really bold goal for 2060 to get to carbon neutrality by then. But I think there's more that China can do in the near term. And one of the priorities for this administration in the next few months will be working with countries like China, like India, that maybe were on the sidelines a little bit in the Leaders Summit and are ready to do more. But I think the U.S. will need to show its own leadership to get those countries to do more as well. But that will be vital if we're going to get the kind of ambition globally that we need to tackle climate change.
Nathaniel Keohane, thank you.
Thanks very much.